Well, more and more property developers are opting for sustainability in the form of green buildings, not only as an alternative building initiative, but as a unique selling point to discerning buyers. Well, why green? Maybe it's an obvious question. Brian Wilkinson, CEO of the Green Building Council of South Africa, and Gavin Coder, who is project advisor to the head of Provincial Public Works in the Western Cape Government, now join us for more. Brian, let's start with you. It's mom and apple pie, as the Americans say, isn't it? Green buildings, well, of course we have to have green buildings that use less electricity, that use less air conditioning and so on. So what are the issues? Where are we in South Africa with so-called green buildings?
Good morning to you, David. In fact, it's good news in South Africa. We've had a huge take-up of commitment to green. We as the Green Building Council really try and do three things. So we spread the word as to why green and what green's about. We run a rating system, a certification engine, if you want, which sort of is a high integrity way of saying I truly have a green building. And then we try and do some of the advocacy stuff. In terms of take-up in South Africa, we're barely 6 years old. We've already had, and we have up until now operated in a fairly small niche, which has been the new building sector. We've already had 40 fairly significant buildings certified. We have another 60 or so that are pending. So there's been an incredible take-up. We put 700-800 people in our convention centre. We've trained over 5,000 people. So where is green building in South Africa? Alive and well, and lots happening.
Gavin, if I could bring you in and your role as advisory, in an advisory role with the Public Works Department in the Western Cape. I don't want to be rude about the Public Works Department, but many public buildings are old and pretty run down and not very well decorated, and the department inherits them from other people who didn't look after them very well. I don't know how many new buildings Public Works is putting up, so I suppose on the one hand you've got to look at old buildings and see how environment friendly they are, and do you have specifications for new buildings that government puts up, and what is the position?
Yes, morning, David. Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely right. We do have a legacy of old buildings, but there is an extensive program for new buildings, and one of the pillars on which we've built our green economy commitments in the Public Works Department is the new built environment, and we've committed to at least getting a Green Building Council 4-star rating for all new buildings. So yeah, it's green building is no longer just in the domain of the private sector. It's got to be undertaken by government, and the national government, the Department of Environmental Affairs, have determined outcomes which translate into strategic provincial objectives, and within our provincial Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, we have a national, provincial outcome, mainstreaming sustainability and optimizing resource use efficiency. And as the implementing agent of public works, of government policy, Public Works has to implement that. And we've built our green economy strategy, as I said, on 4 pillars. One is the built environment, as I said. Secondly, to save electricity through energy efficient technologies. Thirdly, in own energy generation. That's essentially photovoltaic solar. And lastly, in other areas such as waste management and reuse of water.
Well, it does obviously make economic sense, but on the other hand, there may be people coming back to you, Brian, who would say it's a bit like the power stations and the carbon taxes and so on, saying, yes, we agree it's a good thing to do, but there is a cost. And if you have to put the survival of our business, or in the electricity area, keeping the lights on against the carbon taxes, I'm afraid there's no choice. But it sounds like with the green buildings, if you look at electricity and waste and the things that we've been talking about, it actually is a good business case. Is there anyone still objecting to this?
Yeah, the perennial question, David, is always, well, this thing costs more. We dispute whether there is in fact a significant premium for building green. We did some work in 2011 on the so-called rands and cents of green building, and since we spelled SENSE, so not a spelling mistake, which sought to really try to articulate the business case. And we came up with 10 very significant financial benefits, things from higher rentals all the way through to improved indoor environmental quality equals higher staff productivity. So the business case for green is actually pretty well entrenched. The sort of barrier that has been put forward in the past of green buildings cost more tends to be becoming less. I have a favorite argument, which, if you'll indulge me for a second, says that nobody has ever disputed that an A-grade building costs more to build than a B-grade building. And I don't think there are many property developers of significance out there that would argue nowadays that an A-grade building has to be a green building. So if there is a premium for building green, I think that premium is more attached to it being an A-grade building than some sort of, tech wizardry that underpins green.
Yeah. Going back to the public sector there, Gavin, I mean, you can't talk for your colleagues, but how are you doing in the Western Cape, and what's your impression of the country generally, and to what extent is government able to push through? I mean, you said earlier that the National Department has required the following things, but then the national departments in other areas require all sorts of things, but they don't happen.
David, the Western Cape government has also gone so far as to establish a sector development agency called Green Cape. And there are a number of projects that are being run by Green Cape to build the Western Cape as the hub of the green economy in Africa. And a lot of these projects are designed to stimulate the economy around the green economy. The Public Works branch has recently commenced a feasibility study for to put PV solar on our rooftops in the CBD. And the whole idea with this is to roll it out into schools and the health service buildings around the province in due course. So there is a lot of work going on, and the different projects and sector drives do complement each other.
Yeah.
So there is a lot being achieved.
Well, that's good to know. And one thinks of the solar power in particular. A lot of the smaller houses in new housing developments, you see they have the little solar heater on the roof. And then you go to a big building like the West Bank building in Fairland in Johannesburg, which has these vast solar panels, and presumably that's a very green building indeed. Brian, at what point do we no longer need a green building council, that you actually make yourself redundant because everyone wants to do it and is doing it?
Yeah, David, forgive me for chuckling. The US Green Building Council, which is the one that's been around for the longest, framed one of their previous conferences on exactly that question, and they sort of put themselves 20 years ahead and said, well, everything that could be done has been done. I always like to, I think we'll be around for a long, long time. Green building, we talk about regulations and common practice as being, if you want, the floor. Green building ratings and sort of this aspirational stuff then becomes the ceiling that people target. I think we're going to be around for a long, long time. We have such an exciting future ahead of us. In fact, this month, believe it or not, we sort of move out of the traditional new building environment into launching 2 new rating systems, one for existing buildings and the other for interiors. And this takes green building in terms of the whole sort of formal certification stuff out of what could be called quite a small niche market. I mean, new buildings may be 2% of total stock, into what is then a mass market. So if you just use my numbers from earlier on, if we've done sort of 100 certifications in the 4 or so years that we've been running a certification engine for, if we use that as a base and say that new buildings are 2%, then the market for an existing building type certification would be in the order of 5,000. So it's huge. And we're very excited now that we we sort of leverage what is a great platform, a great foundation, and now move into what is a very, very much larger community. We're including in that an interiors rating. So for the first time, you know, green buildings have traditionally been the sort of preserve of the building owner or the investor. We now move into an environment where a tenant can in fact achieve recognition for what they've done in terms of their fit out. So have they installed energy efficient lighting? Have they used materials that reduce their emissions and so on?